If you're a tech founder, this podcast will show you several ways to explain your software, your hardware, any kind of technical products and solutions in plain English. You'll learn how to cut through the words that confuse prospects and create marketing messages that get prospects excited. You'll hear case studies, examples, wordsmithing ideas, and tactics to refine your B2B marketing messages. Welcome to the morebusiness.com podcast. Today, I'm excited to welcome David Mountain. David served his early years in the United States Navy as a Naval Intelligence Officer, and then he went on to get his MBA at Duke, and he is a career B2B marketer focusing on healthcare and enterprise software sales. David, welcome today to the podcast.
Thank you, Raj. Happy to be here.
Today's topic is something that I think a lot of technical founders can really relate to, and it's how do you take something that's really technical, if you've got a technical product that has all kinds of features, capabilities, things you can do with it, use cases, and translate that into something that's easy to understand. And that's something that a lot of technical founders struggle with. So David's going to help shed some light on how he's actually done that for several companies. So I'm going to focus on one of his prior adventures, a company called Blue Stripe Software. So David, a little bit about your background in B2B marketing. Let's talk about Blue Stripe Software. You joined the company and you were brought in as head of marketing, right?
Yeah, I was brought in to run everything except product, which was good because I can do a lot of things well, but product management is none of them. So that was a wise move. But yeah, so at Blue Stripe, a little background, the company had built this really powerful application monitoring tool for large scale enterprise distributed applications. So if you think of an online banking system, for example, think of all the stuff that goes on behind the screen in order to make that bank work and make that experience work across potentially tens of millions of customers. You're talking about potentially hundreds of servers for that individual application, different locations, both cloud, on-prem, hybrid cloud, private cloud versions with web servers, load balancers, middleware, and every flavor of database ever made, all of them having to work together. And then when something fails, the IT operations team has to figure out what's going on and why it happened. So we made a tool that would automatically map out this entire architecture and then monitor the traffic, monitor the service level, the service delivery times between the nodes so that you could see when is something not meeting its spec, and then also allow you to drill down and do diagnostics within each individual server. Incredibly powerful tool, incredibly complicated to make this work.
Let me pause for a second and say, who was the buyer in this? What was the ICP, the ideal client profile, so type of company? And then who inside the company actually influenced and made the buying decisions?
Yeah, it's a good question. Our target audience was IT operations and DevOps. So the folks who are, if you think about your typical application process, you've got your development team that is actually writing the code and figuring out how either it's packaged software that's gonna go straight to IT operations, or if they're building it their own, there's dev team that's gonna actually build the code. They kick it over the wall to IT operations and say, okay, we wrote it. You guys put it together and make it work. Those are the folks that we're targeting, ones who are responsible for keeping these things up and running, delivering on the SLAs to the business of each of the applications that's in their system.
What kind of titles would these people have inside a company?
Director of operations, sometimes it varied. Typically, they're part of the CIO's operations and mandates, depending on the size of the company. And in some cases, the profile of the failure would be dealing direct with the CIO, but generally it was director of IT operations was the were the folks that we were selling to.
And the size of the company, ballpark or range?
We ranged. So this is something that as we got focused, we got better at that and we tightened it up. This was part of the problem. Initially, it was whoever would talk to us, as often happens.
Which is so common, right? Yeah.
Imagine, because you don't really know you have an idea of who you think it's going to be. And a lot of product development ends up going this way where these guys are talking to us and this is what they want. So this is what we're building to.
Yeah.
And that happens a lot. In this case, we had been brought in, actually, Bank of America had a high profile failure and brought us, and we ended up being able to help them solve it pretty quickly. And then a lot of our development after that was design. Okay, here's the environment they're in. Very complex back end. A lot of things have been kludged together because of acquisitions. You have different systems that had to work together.
Right.
So a lot going on in the back that we built to be able to make work. And so pretty complex product.
And more than likely, this was started by a technical founder or a technical founder team. And I know as a technical founder of companies myself, the struggle is that when you build a technical product, you need to have as close to 100% solution as you possibly can. So when you try to explain things, you try to explain them in such excruciating detail because we were wired in engineering school to think that way, right? And the thing about marketing is it's almost the opposite. You can't explain everything to somebody because one, you're going to be missing the mark. You have to really figure out how to hone in fast to something that's going to tie into what they actually want.
Yeah,
So
that is absolutely on target. And
yeah,
there's this tension in technical marketing where the company, the founders, the entity, the whole organization wants to wants to make sure that they capture everything that they're doing because it's all cool. It's all really important. And it is, but you have to reduce the cognitive burden on the prospect and make it as simple as possible for them to be able to actually understand, okay, what is this thing? What is it you're going to do for me? And why would I care? And you have to get there very
yeah. Was the director of operations that you were targeting always a technical person?
Yes.
Okay. So that was a little bit of an easier sale from that perspective because you were talking engineering to an engineering buyer, where sometimes that's not always the case.
To some extent, but I would say they were technical, and I'll get a little bit over my skis here because I can't think of that. I don't know the credentialing properly. They tended to they were technical people, but they were very hands-on practical people. And our engineering team for a while wouldn't even interview anybody who didn't have a computer science PhD. They were working at that level.
Okay.
And those guys really cared deeply about the details.
Yeah.
So there was a real tension there. So as an example, when I started, company tagline on the hero spot on the front of the web page, 27 words long.
That is a lot of information to digest. That's a lot to read. Yeah.
We got it down to 3, but it took a lot of work, but we were able to get it as an iterative process, but really tightening up. What do we really want people to know about this? Why would they care? And we're able to get it down to where it was very clear, very concise, still accurate, still capturing what we do, something that somebody could digest quickly and say, okay, do I need that or not?
Yeah. And I think one of the challenges is that when you do all this marketing to get to, it could be SEO marketing, it could be everything, to get someone to your page. And if that page is just too much, they're not going to be able to process it. And then they bounce, they go to another site, they leave your site. So to transform a 27-word description into 3 concise words that resonated with somebody almost sounds like a mountain to climb. David Mountain. So tell me. Yes.
So then when I was thinking about talking about this, so how did we get?
Yeah.
And because it wasn't easy, there was a lot of work involved, and you have personalities involved, and you have people's egos, and everyone wants to add things.
Yeah.
There's a bias towards addition. Nobody wants to take things away. And really a big piece of it was to step back and say, all right, let's go through all these capabilities. And it's get people in a room with a whiteboard. We had the conference room with the whiteboard paint on all the walls. So you could just write all over everything. And you start to just, what are the capabilities? What are the features we have in this? I'm new. I was constantly the least technical person in the room, and sometimes that's an advantage because it's okay. That's great. What does that do? Why do we care? Why do we care? Why does a customer care? Why did we build that anyway? And sometimes people didn't remember why we built that. It just seemed like a good idea at the time. And it's just, does anyone use that? We don't know.
And sometimes the feature thing that you build out is basically one customer might have asked you to build something. And then you think in your head that, oh, that sounds really cool. If we had this, we could sell it to a whole bunch of other people. And you end up becoming a software development arm for free for that one customer who just wants that one solution, right? It's very common.
And there's an even worse version of that, which is when you're not closing deals. And sales, since what would it take for us to win this deal? And the customer people want to be nice. So they answer the question. They're not just going to say, your product is trash. We don't want to talk to you. But they said, oh, you didn't have this capability. That's why we want this, which may or may not be true. Often it isn't.
Right. Yeah.
And then, we've got to if we had this feature, we would close. And you end up with a whole bunch of stuff that there's no roadmap. There's no coherence to the product design anymore. Because you do that for a year, features that matter get pushed aside in order to just try to respond to what may or may not be useful market feedback.
Yeah. Yeah. So how did you go from that 27? So you started writing a whole bunch of stuff on the boards.
So we're going through, and then you say, okay, so we go through, here's all the stuff it does. And then you start grouping it. These things don't exist in a vacuum. They work together. So you group those individual features into capabilities. And then you say, okay, ultimately, what does that do? What does that do customer.
What's the benefit of that set of capabilities?
What is it? First off, what is it? Because really it's a bunch of features work together to provide a capability. And then does the customer care about this? And then we can talk about why. So what we ended up with, so again, remember the example I gave you, you've got this massively complex environment that the IT operations is responsible for care and feed. They honestly don't have good visibility into it. Often they couldn't honestly tell you which individual servers were involved in a particular application. Every data center you'd go to, there inevitably somebody would say, oh yeah, that rack over there, nobody knows what it does. We're just afraid to turn it off.
Which is unfortunately a little too often that happens, right?
And that's happening in the cloud now too. It's just they're more hidden.
Yeah.
But what we would basically, the capabilities we were offering is we would map the environment. So now you can see exactly what you're using. Instead of the 4,000 different servers that I'm responsible for, I know that it's one of these 40, right?
Yeah.
Monitor. Tell me what's happening with each of these things and fix. When something's broken, how do I fix it? How do I get in and do it? So so all of the capabilities that this thing had, and it was an amazing piece of software, no question. Everything fell into one of those categories. And all three of those capabilities resonated with our target audience because they were part of their day-to-day life. And they had that, if you ask them, what do they do all day? I have to monitor things and I have to fix them when they break. And so by doing that, we were able to boil a very complicated product down to a very simple statement, then have that statement resonate with the people we were trying to.
Do you remember what the statement was?
It was map, monitor, and fix.
That's simple. And I like the fact that it's 3 words because I think there's some market research done that if you start going beyond 3, it becomes harder for people to remember. And so getting something that's so technical down to 3 it's like a stroke of genius there, Dave.
Again, it was a team effort. It's not just, and the beauty of that kind of a structure is that it allows room to expand. And you say, Matt, let's talk about that. Now we can talk about all the stuff that we do, all the things going on under the covers, if it's appropriate to have that conversation because you get brought in, you have your main buyer, then you have the technical review group. And as the bigger an enterprise you're dealing with, the more people involved in the sale. Some of them want to dive deep into how does it work? And you can there's room for that there. That content should exist. It's going to happen at some point in the sales cycle, but not on the front end.
So once you changed that, what happened to your web traffic? Did you notice a change in stickiness, fewer bounces, and also sales? What happened?
I'd say so our web traffic, our stickiness on the website got better. We exactly as you said, we had people stay longer. They didn't bounce as frequently. So we
almost overnight, I'll bet, because suddenly your message went from, I got to read, which means you're making me, the prospect, do work to understand what you're offering, to just 3 words were like, oh, yep, I need that. Or I don't need it. And that's fine too. You don't want to waste your time talking to people who are not qualified.
But really the bigger impact was in the sales process because our sales team was struggling with how to explain. And this is something that you see in a lot of in the startup world, especially. Typically your first 10 customers are founder sales. The founder knows the product and cares deeply about it. And typically if they're successful, they just do it naturally. And that's wonderful. And that is a totally unscalable process. And so you say, oh, let's hire some enterprise sales guy to come in here. Okay. Candidly, the guys who are available aren't always the best.
And also you still got to give them the message because they're not going to know the product, might not even know the nuances, the niche, all that kind of stuff, the needs. So to be able to convey it, they need messaging. They need talking points.
You need to be able to make it easy for somebody who knows nothing about this space to be able to convey the value. And so when we consolidated that positioning and then reworked the messaging material and the sales materials to work under that framework, it got a lot easier for them to explain the product to get to the second meeting because they go in with a complicated pitch that they didn't really know very well. And they lose people quickly and say, this is interesting, but thank you. And now we're not going further, as opposed to something that grabs people emotionally. And then you can have the technical discussion. But there's a time and there's a sales process and it needs to be a process, not just here's a bunch of stuff and we hope you like it.
Yeah. I think you said a magic word, and that is it grabs people emotionally, a magic phrase. And that is a lot of times when engineers, me included, try to sell technical solutions, you really want to solve for something. Because again, engineering school wires you to just think that way. And we overlook the fact that there's an emotional component to a sale. And so when you have those phrases that capture that emotion, people can start to see their lives playing out in a better way. And that's when you can start having those discussions. Can you share more about metrics, if you recall those, about what that did for your sales team? Did like sales cycle times get shorter? Were they able to set up more meetings?
Yeah, it was, let's see, in terms of the actual metrics on it, I don't remember the numbers. I know that our close rate got better. Our pipeline, we had pretty much expansion across the board. The pipeline improved. So pipeline size increased because basically people were getting beyond the first meeting more frequently. So they were unstuck at the beginning. And then the close rate actually went up as well. And there were a lot of other things going on at the same time. And the company's improving in a lot of areas at the same time. It isn't just this one thing. There's all sorts of things happening there. The bigger thing that I think the biggest impact, and I was thinking about this, was that with the emphasis on saying we have three main categories of impact: map, monitoring, and fixing. We opened up the partner channel because it made product understandable to our target partner, who was Microsoft. And they were able to see it that, our product fills a hole that we don't have in our monitoring solution.
Yeah.
We bring and we're able to, and we've been in their partner program for at least 2 years before this. Not much to show for it, maybe one or two deals that weren't really that exciting. And I think there's, again, a tendency in startups to think, if I could get into the Salesforce app portal or the Microsoft partner program or any of these big ones, then the money will just flow in. And the truth is, anybody can get into those if you're willing to fill out the forms. And the sales reps, that sales organization doesn't care about your product until they see value in it for themselves. In our case, because we were able to make it clear what we could do for them, they could say, if I bring Blue Stripe in, I can actually be more effective in selling our core product. And that opens up a whole host of data sale opportunities. And that partnership was what actually led to our acquisition. That was that pipeline really took off.
Yeah. I think and to your point, because your reps were able to communicate with Microsoft's reps about how to communicate your software and the benefits of it much more concisely. When these channel partners evaluate companies like yours, they're talking to many companies. And so if they had to memorize a 27-word description of what a product does, they're too busy. It's just so hard to grasp, right? They just wouldn't be able to get it. But once you break it down into three simple words, I think everything, like you said, becomes much more digestible. So your partners can sell it more and the light bulbs start going off.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. And so how did that progress? Once you started really having your partner channel sales accelerate, it sounds like if that's when the pipeline really starts to go faster, you really get people interested in you. How quickly after that happened did the company get acquired?
Let's see. I'm trying to remember the time frame on that one. It was within a year.
Wow.
And some of that was internal pressure. Frankly, our investors were looking to move towards a sale. So there's always a lot of factors that go into
it. Yes, there are. It's never one, but the fact that you can see the revenue path starting to grow, I think a lot of buyers are very interested in the actual rate of acceleration than it is just that, you've hit certain targets. They want to look at how rapidly you're growing, because that means if they get in early, they actually buy you at a bit of a bargain price compared to what it would cost even just 2 years down the road if you kept up that acceleration.
No, that's definitely true. And there was, and to some extent, this was a product grab. We ended up with a competition between a couple of large software companies of just saying, okay, this is a capability that will make our core products better. And we were demonstrating in the market that was true, at which point we could get a little bit of a bidding war and drive our valuation up. And it was time to take the money off the table. So
yeah. David, what would your advice be to a technical founder who is in that same situation where they're trying to figure out how to encapsulate their product and all its use cases into something that's so simple and digestible that both the technical buyers could understand and that would also make them feel good about explaining everything?
Yeah. So first off, it's hard work, and it's not something that you're just going to bring somebody in for a weekend retreat and come away and be done. It's an iterative process. When the way we worked through it again was we started with the product side of just going through what does this thing do? And then you talk to the sales team, you talk to the folks who are closer to the customer. Okay. Talk to the salespeople, talk to your pre-sales people, talk to your customer success folks. What are you hearing? How does this fit in people's day-to-day lives? the standard question is, what problem gets solved? What problem are we solving? And that's the beginning of it. But you need to go deeper than that, not just what problem are we solving, but who has that problem and how much does that problem impact your buyer's life? Because you might be solving a problem that nobody cares about.
Right. Yeah.
Mhm.
Did this also impact the product direction once you started to see that core message started to resonate? So when someone requested that new feature, the engineers didn't go out and run and build the capability?
To some extent, but also because, once you get one of the things that happened out of this as well is as we started working closer with Microsoft's and the Microsoft sales team, we're primarily selling to their installed base. And that tended to be less of your giant enterprise and more of your mid-size to small enterprise kind of business.
Mm.
And so we got fewer of those requests because their backgrounds
Okay.
tend to be their architecture tended to be a little more homogeneous. The back end was a little easier to manage. They
Yeah.
still needed all the stuff we did. They weren't going to have some specialty, some kind of obscure middleware or that's tying into
Yeah.
a mainframe computer that's been running in the back since 1976. That's still part of their core business, the way you would with some banks.
Yeah.
So it tended, so in some ways, by focusing on that installed base, we ended up reducing a lot of those types of requests.
That's good. That's actually makes your job easier as a company too, to grow when you don't have
Yes.
too many outside of the box feature requests. Very nice, Dave. Dave, what's the best way for people to reach you in case they had some follow-up questions on how you transform these really technical products into simple messages?
Let's see. So just hit me up on LinkedIn, or I can give you my email if we can put it in
Yeah.
show notes underneath.
Yeah,
Or,
we could put in the show notes, and I find LinkedIn is probably the best way. So just do a quick search on David Mountain, and you're going to find David pretty quickly, right?
yeah, that's
No.
as far as I know, I'm the only Dave Mountain in Durham, North Carolina.
All right. Very good. David, thank you so much. Very enlightening conversation. I really appreciate all the takeaways here, not just about how you build product and not build features that people may not want, but also how you focus that message and simple whiteboarding techniques, clustering them into categories and then iterating it. How long did it take, actually? I'm curious, from the start of you joining them to actually create that final 3 words that went on the page?
It was probably 6 to 9 months of
Wow.
of working. I think we all knew that what we had wasn't working well.
Mm.
There was and it made it easier because there was widespread agreement that we
Yeah.
did need to change it. And there was a lot of, let's try it this way. Let's work on this and iterate through, and some false starts. One of the best tricks or tools that I found for this was to make sure you go into the trade show and
Mm.
work at the booth and spend
Yeah.
the time in the booth, because you find out very quickly if your message resonates or not, because people
Yeah.
walk up to you and say, "What do you do?"
Yeah.
You've got 15 seconds to answer that question in a way that they
Right.
can. And
Yeah.
it focuses your attention quicker than having people walk away because they don't care.
They don't care, and they're being polite if they're standing there, just glazed eyes, not following what you're saying. But when you get it down to just a few simple words or phrases, that then you actually don't waste your time at the booth talking to people who aren't qualified, and you can focus on the ones that really do. Excellent. Dave, thanks for the conversation. Very enlightening about how you transform your messaging.
All right, Raj, thank you. Take care.